Live tonight from the infamous Talladega Superspeedway, we say good evening, sim racing fans, and welcome to our continuing coverage of the 2020 Real Sim Racing Full Throttle Cup Series, powered by Boosted Playoffs. We're ready to go racing for the 25th race of this 2020 campaign and the second race of the round of 12 as we welcome you here into the RaceBot TV booth for our coverage of the round of 12. As always, myself, Evan Pisoko, happy to be joined by Justin Prince, and downstairs is our producer, Hugo Lewis. And Justin, a lot of drama coming out of a round of 12 opener last week in a night race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway that has a lot of drivers, I think, a little bit on edge as far as where they sit in the points coming into this middle race.
Yeah, everything completely changed with the complexion of how the playoffs were expected to be shaped out with the final 5 laps or so of that race. It looked before that Brian Chambliss may be the driver who came away with the checker flag. Instead, calamity ensued. You still had a first-time winner in Scott McClendon break through, but that's going to be one where several drivers are thinking, I could have made some good progress for the championship tonight. Instead, drivers like George and Chambliss and several others are going to have to be clawing their way back for the next couple of races to even have a shot on moving on to the round of 8.
Yeah, and that win or lack thereof, Brian Chambliss is in a very good position. He's only 4 points below the very top spot, and again, they're all trying to stay top 8 in this round. So compared to Grant Davis, who was the first driver on the outside looking in, Brian Chambliss is plus 12. But it still could have been a lot better. He could have won, he could have been locked in, could have been guaranteed to be racing in the round of 8. Instead, he's here. I mentioned Scott McClendon, second round in a row, in which it is a non-playoff driver winning the opening round and playing spoiler. Well, if you weren't with us at Vegas, Justin, it was, of course, that incident with Gary Sexton and Rhett McBride that brought out that yellow just prior to the white flag coming out, which eventually is what caused Brian Chambliss to lose what at that time seemed like a surefire win. So supplemental discipline handed down over the course of this past week. Gary Sexton has been parked for the remainder of the 2020 Full Throttle Cup calendar, and as well will not be permitted to participate in the 2021 Winter Series. I note that because this is not the first time we've seen a similar incident. Jared Bogard, you see him 16th there. He was a driver who had championship hopes at the start of the round of 16, had some incidents at Darlington, intentional wrecking. He was suspended for 3 weeks. It's his first week back here tonight. So some pretty stiff punishments for those drivers involved in those intentional accidents.
Yeah, and it has to be that case because, as we've seen, it changed the complexion of championship fights. For Rhett McBride, I think that's the catalyst for why, after some of the incidents happened between Morgold and company, he got involved in incidents in that Darlington race. And then, of course, we talked about the ramifications for Chambliss and the ramifications as well that came into play for several of your drivers outside the top 8 now in the standings. That incident doesn't happen, we're talking about a completely different championship standings entering tonight. This is the type of race where you don't want to have to rely on said situation on points because, well, guess what? This is a track where anything can happen. One big one, and you can be immediately bumped out of that top 8 for the final cutoff race for the round of 12. It's just that unpredictable of a racetrack here at Talladega.
And speaking of some of those names, you can see Joseph Tice and Brian Chambliss on screen right now. Single car qualifying here from Talladega Superspeedway. This is also a big race to mention for those playoff drivers because if it's anything like we saw yesterday afternoon in the NASCAR Cup Series, who knows where we're going to be at the end of the night, but there is that win in you're in, so that's going to be critical as we head to a tricky road race next week from the Charlotte Motor Speedway Roval as Tice going to spin that car out after he completes his second and final timed lap. And there's Liam Sheen with the Brendan Gaughan tribute paint scheme, paying tribute to Brendan Gaughan, who made his last NASCAR Cup Series start just yesterday. But on the flip side, Justin, we talk about those non-playoff drivers, and we just detailed in some good length how those non-playoff cars have been a big factor, but not in the way that we want. We like the stories if Scott McClendon gets a win and gets a first career win, or Malik Ray comes in and steals that win from a playoff driver. I mean, those are the storylines you like, but not when those non-playoff drivers are causing accidents that are involving the playoff cars. And on that note of those non-playoff drivers, as we go on board the machine here, they all look at this race as their last chance to get a win realistically. We'll go to the Roval, probably going to be a top playoff driver. I think Martinsville could be a toss-up. We saw Daniel Scott get a first career win in the spring race there earlier this year in May. But aside from that, a lot of drivers not in the playoff field have this one circled as one they really want to win and feel like they can.
Yeah, because this is also the type of track where the underdogs usually rise up to the top in that you don't need to rely on just, say, the raw pace that you have. This is one track where you need to have friends. You need to have the right strategy. You need to be able to plan things out. You need to be lucky is the key thing as well. So those type of things all come into play at a track such as this. We're going to see mixed strategies likely tonight and many drivers working together throughout the events of this evening. That it's just a matter of which strategy wins over tonight and which cars make it to the checker flag over the course of 75 laps.
We can see a lot of overcast conditions during the qualifying session, but the sun is out now. Let's go trackside. Take a look at your starting grid, and it is Grant Davis on pole position for this one. Lone playoff driver on those front two rows, joined by Kyle Kamer second, Agno Phillip third, and Matt Mara in the number 4 position. Then Brian Chambers, he'll start from 5th. Ross Cato alongside in 6th. Michael Araya 7th. Joseph Tice in 8th. Sean Kalist, Liam Sheen, your top 10.
Jeremy Miller starts off at 11 tonight, had some good speed at Las Vegas. He'll start alongside John Fowler, who's part of the Atlantic region. 13th, it's Cole Freilich back in the field, part of Central Florida Esports, who'll start alongside our final driver to put up a time in Daniel Scott. Andrew Freenosh, known for staying in the back of the Super Speedway races in 2020. He's lined up alongside his friend Dylan Jones. They were teammates for Road to Pro this year. David Washington starts in 17th with Rhett McBride, Sam Vieto, and Jared Mogart back in the 00 tonight, starting from 20th.
And continuing on through, Daniel Eberhardt's going to be given 21st position, along with Kyle Trudell in 22nd. Jonathan Cadell back on track 23rd. Eric Stanford in the number 24 position. Playoff drivers there on back will include Adam Benefiel in 26th and Thomas George in 27th.
28th spot going to Bradley Burke this evening with Dane Cruz in 29th position. Steve Durham deep in the field in 30th position. Michael Kaczynski starting in 31st with Steve Sora, along with John Rodden, Andrew Pellegrini, Trevin Valderrama, and Devin Woodfield, rounding out your 36-car field. Some good competitors on the grid tonight, Evan.
Yeah, big field of 36 cars, but only the top 14 drivers actually opted to take a time in the qualifying session. So that is something important to keep note of. And as we roll here from the grid, let's also talk a bit of strategy, Justin. This is not a long race at Talladega, 200 miles and 75 laps. But the interesting thing for me is the timing on this race based on our strategy, because 75 laps, the way to go. Granted, we probably aren't going to go green all the way. However, that green flag run fuel number, Justin, just shy of a one-stopper, so that makes this really interesting.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy to be able to make it on fuel. To put it this way, if you save, you can make it on one stop. It's 38 laps at the very most. It was seen in the Coke Series as well as in several official races this week. Here's the thing, though. You push the pace or lead laps, it's more so 35 to 37 laps. In other words, this could be one where patience is going to be crucial if you want to be able to make it on the gas, especially if there is no caution flags to help you. If we do get a set incident at a track such as this, which is a possibility, then everything changes on how you would play the rest of this race out, whether it's strategy or whether it's fuel only or whether it's how you attack this track.
And I was honestly surprised how many drivers opted to not go for qualifying. I thought that more of those non-playoff drivers would get up and in the mix. However, with only 14 cars taking Q, there's a lot of those drivers who, again, haven't gotten a win yet this year, feel like this could be their best opportunity, that are also deciding to hang back. Everybody wants to just be safe off of the get-go of this boosted Club 200 and make it all 200 miles here for the 25th race of 2020. As always, on a Monday night, we're happy that you're with us on RaceSpot TV and the iRacing Esports Network. A couple of drivers trying to get their spot figured out in line. That's Cato up in the middle. Well, we're going to be okay for now. Pace car off and in, and we say, let's go playoff racing from Talladega. You can see the inside strong the first time down the Alabama Gang super stretch. Only the number 23 car of Matt Mara now hanging onto the outside, just inside of the top 10.
And it's not a surprise with the mileage being so close, how many drivers immediately migrated to the bottom, but at the same time, this is also a chance for some others to say, you know what, I might want track position, start pushing forward. At the same time, we've already seen a couple packs break in a little bit, or break up, I should say. You don't want to be too far back at these lead cars, otherwise you might not have an easy time to catch them later on.
And at least at the top of the scoring pylon, looks like Grant Davis wants to push that 8-car Kamer out as much as he can and try to make sure that that outside line dies off. But there's a move by Brian Chambliss, one of your playoff drivers. You can see along with that number 24 machine on the inside of Grant Davis. You can tell those playoff drivers apart from everybody else because they have the pink on the spoilers, the splitter, and the windshield banners. That'll help you keep track of where they all are on track, as Davis now going to give up the bottom, step up and control the outside line. He'll lead the first 2 laps.
Looking like he wants to control the field here, but eventually you're going to have to think. He's going to have to think big picture here because you burn some more laps of fuel and about a gallon or so more by being the lead car. See some of the onboard views now on your screen, for example, and how patient some of the drivers are and are looking at where is the mirror, what's happening behind me, what's happening in front of me to time up each of the runs throughout the evening.
It ends with Matt Mara, and Justin, at no point is he looking actually straight. You can see he's basically looking kind of at that A-post on the left-hand side, so he can see in front of him, but he can also see to the left-hand side of him to the row on the inside. So he's not, looking straight and checking to the left. He's basically keeping his head at about a 15, 20-degree angle down to the bottom so he can see what the cars inside of him are doing.
And also, if you look towards the gauges, that is actually allowing them to see where the gauges are specifically and how the temps are, because with the fixed setup, it's set on the conservative side for Tate, 25%. You can back up by about half a car length and probably cool your car off in most situations to be able to then push the next lap or so. But if you allow that engine to go too far into the red for too long or put your water pressures too up high, then you're going to end up blowing the motor in the middle of the pack, and have seen that happen several times. You need to be aware of that as a driver and know the limitations on how hard you can push, when you can push, and when you should be saving your temperatures by backing up like he is now a little bit.
A lot of engine temperature issues here this week at Talladega on the surface, and for that outside line having kind of totally fallen apart right off of the get-go, they've got a decent amount of cars up top now, and in fact, inside of the top 10, pretty equal. That lead has got 6, the bottom's got 6, and they're actually trying to pull away just a little bit from everybody else. And this is kind of what you cautioned at, Justin, that a lot of drivers may not want to get into this battle right away, but if you get too far behind, it might not be good for you. And you can see Kalis is kind of the last car in line there, but started with Jared Mogard, very disorientated and disorganized, I guess would be a better way to put it, from there on back. That's actually allowing this group that's too wide to catch up and pull away, as some lap traffic's going to hold the outside, and that's a tough break for last week's winner. Scott McClendon had a connection issue, missed the start of this race.
Already a lap down, and that can be tricky to get back unless you get, it's a misfortune from some of the others as you see him ducking into the line. That's the main thing, though. Because of where he is in this line, he's going to be able to stay in the lead pack and potentially be able to race his way around and be in the lucky dog spot to then pick off the other cars as they lose the pack as the race goes on. As long as he keeps up with these cars, he's in a decent spot. But to get to your exact point, there's the positives and the negatives of all this, right, with this main group. The positives being you go faster usually if you're side by side in a lot of cases, especially if you're tighter up because of the ability to side draft, which helps raise the speed for the entire pack on iRacing. The downside is, though, again, what about the fuel scenario? That's going to be something I think a lot of the air cars behind them in the air packs are actually slowing down a bit to make sure they can, as we see cars falling to the bottom.
And then his way to the apron, and now smoking trouble. The 27 of Miller's too low. He's going to come up in front of traffic. Miller's going to spin off of the 44, and a caution at lap number 7 that kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, that was something where I think that he may have wanted to come down, or at least didn't realize the spotter was there. It was 3 wide. Miller had tried to force it up the middle and in turn cause contact. That's going to really hurt Lariah, was just 1 point back of Adam Benefiel entering the night. But here's the look specifically. Cameron just ducked down. Just decided to back out of it at that exact moment. Seemed like the right moment because Mara got hooked around and Miller trying to lock on the brakes. Hit hard by Lariah as he spins it around the racetrack.
Yeah, very slow spin for the 27, but it was hard contact with Lariah getting into the back of him. And you're right, I thought when we saw that first car dive out of line, it was kind of the start of all this, but it was just Kamer maybe realizing that was happening. The gate machine dove low. That was all by design. And then it was a bit of 3 wide with the 27 and the 23 going 3 wide. And I'm not sure, if the 27 really had a spot watch. You'll see that blue car go to the middle, and then that Kaczynski tries to come back down, basically just pushing the car in front of him, and comes down on the 27.
That was Mara specifically, but I think part of the factor too is a lot of times as a driver, you almost get tunnel vision where you forget you even have your spotter on, and in turn try and follow the car in front. Huge hit though here for Jonathan Cadell. He got into the very back end of Adam Benefiel and all this to the point where I think Cadell broke his steering wheel.
Well, Jonathan Cadell hasn't made a lot of starts in the last month or two, so a tough way for him to return to RSR competition after all of that chaos down there. Is going to have the front end beat up just a little bit, aside from the literal mechanic issues. But cars down pit road now. We talked about how we were very close on fuel. If these drivers were trying to stretch to a one-stopper, they have 3 sets of tires available on pit road. Most drivers just taking fuel only, if any, when they were down on pit road. Nobody really taking tires. It's not a huge factor. But if you pit now, Justin, that's certainly a much more plausible number. You can go green to this point, and I'm not going to say comfortably, but probably rather easily make the distance at a one-stopper. Not everybody pitted, though. Our top 7 stayed out. That's Agno Phillip, John Fowler, Kyle Kamer, Thomas George, Dane Cruz, and Ross Cato. Looks like Jared Bogart as well came down pit road, so it's only going to be your top 6. Do they save enough under the yellow here to also bridge that gap and be good on a one-stop?
In theory, yes, as long as they hold in the clutch as well as turn off the ignition, you can only burn maybe a 1/10 or 2 of a gallon under the caution flag laps if your equipment allows you to do so. If you're just revving the engine or driving normally, though, likely not as so much. The main concern I have, though, is it's just 6 cars, really, who stayed out and didn't take fuel in all of this. They're going to have to come down eventually, and the main thing is they're going to be offset from everybody else, so it's not just as simple as, okay, we're going to go to our pit stop. If they don't have enough cars or enough speed after their said stops, if it continues to stay green to that point, then that's going to be where they potentially can lose time and maybe the pack.
It's a great point, because just because they can make it on their one stop doesn't mean their one stop's going to come at the same time as everybody else, obviously being about 8 laps shorter on fuel than everybody else will be. So 6 isn't an awful number to come down and pit with, but you need all of them to pit, and you have to have a damn good pit stop. Otherwise, it's not going to work out well for you. Again, all of this, granted, we even get that far, but that's kind of the mentality you have to have. And I will say, surprised in half of these cars. Cato, Kamer, Phillip, those are, top 5, top 10 cars off of the get-go anyways. They could have just as easily pitted and still been, right next to the guy that they were running with before. Not surprised with Fowler picking up 10 spots, with Thomas George picking up 23, Dane Cruz picking up 24. That doesn't shock me at all, because this is a good way to get track position. Bit of a gamble, but maybe worth it. If it doesn't pan out for the likes of Phillip, who, by the way, talking about Vegas, had a really good run there up to a point, thought that maybe he was going to end up in victory lane. It would really stink for him to be a P3 car, not pit, and kind of risk it for no reason or little to no, return value.
The only thing I can think of, again, in these situations is they may expect there to be an air caution flag in a similar amount of time, because that's the mindset I've seen work in some cases and not work in our cases, I should rather say, in official racing. So I think part of it is just banking on some trouble, and then in turn, if everyone comes down again and tops off, or most people do, guess what? They're back on the same strategy as the majority of the field. So it's one of those high-risk, high-reward gambles that sometimes works, but a lot of times if you have a clean race, not so much.
And only one way to find out is to race it out. Restart could be coming up this time by. Still a long way to go. 10 laps down, going to be 65 laps still to go from Talladega. So again, top 6 stay down. That's Agnew, Phillip on through Ross Cato. Everybody else from Grant Davis in 7th on back decided to come down pit road. Now I mentioned briefly Jared Mogard is one of the drivers close to P7. But scoring has kind of updated and cycled him back through the field. So it will be Chambliss and Davis side by side at row 4. Not fresher tires, just with that added bit of fuel to see if that can help them in the long term here from Talladega. Pace car off it in. It's going to be Agnew Phillips field to control. Let's see what it does for the restart. Going to put 10 laps down.
Watch how they go up to the gears here, because drivers have reported tire spin even on 10-lap older tires on these bumps this week.
And you can see a big push on the inside. The 8 car wants to go 2-3 shots to the bumper. Now Phillip obliges. Green flag. We're back underway. The inside small jump. Remember last time though, everybody could not wait to abandon the outside line. But the inside's a little bit split apart. Let's see how the top side fares. At a 2, the inside's got the advantage by 4 car lengths.
And as long as the driver who leads the group gets a good launch, the bottom line has been the preferred line on some of the restarts. However, eventually that top line picks up if you've got the numbers. Like this, they're shuffling Kamer out though, 3 wide for the lead.
And I don't know if this is going to work out for Fowler. He needs the 9 car of Thomas George to stay with him, but it's not. There goes the middle. Going to be filled by the 50 at Cato. So Fowler wanted to gain. Instead, he'll lose. It's going to trap he and George as the only cars on that 3rd lane. Now support comes in Liam Sheen.
And a lot of times that can work, potentially, in terms of lineups. They just don't have the numbers for it to happen. Already shuffled out to the back. You see what Chambliss in the bottom corner now, just trying to watch things out here as they are now side by side, about 5 rows deep.
And you can see towards the back of the pack, things single file out, but at least for the top dozen or so, side by side throughout. Freilich now sticking a nose out to that 3rd lane. Maybe he wants to drop to the back. There was no drafting support there, so it seems like the only logical decision is he wanted out. So Burke going to fill the gap. He'll probably end up behind Fowler or so, outside of the top 10. But Agnew Phillip pushed by the number 46 of Dane Cruz behind him, 1st and 2nd on the inside. Looks like those 2 cars working well together.
Yeah, looking like they're nice, decent sync for tonight as well. And some of the drivers who are more on the careful side are now in the spot where they're trying to push on forward here. There goes the 46, though, with a bit of trouble.
He had a connection issue there, lost him for a moment. He's back, and he did the right thing. He pulled down below the yellow line to allow that lead pack to get on through. Now he'll blend back up in traffic, and Dane Cruz, close call there, as his quality dropped just a little bit. Fortunately, didn't cause an accident, but what it did do is it took Agnew Phillips' drafting partner away. So the 8 car of Kamer, the 50 at Cato, had more momentum on the outside line, and they now push the 1-2, dropping down to the inside to now control the inside line.
Now it's in a good spot as well, as Chambliss now that lead car on the top line. Keep an eye, though, on some of the drivers like Steve Durham. He's really trying to cut his way through the field already. Back and forth from line to line. Just following the momentum is a huge chuck on the bottom again.
Oh, and look at the 50 car going to the inside of Kamer. The inside just could not communicate there, and it checked them up so much that the 3 lead cars on the outside passed them. It's Chainless to the lead now.
Not sure what happened there. I think Kato maybe tried to push the issue since he wasn't fully against the yellow line. But that's dangerous to try and play. I've seen the squeeze out work this week up the middle line with these 1 car length distances to give each other room for the corner exits, but not so much on the bottom side, because 9 times out of 10, you get real world style big ones.
And maybe it works on the last lap, but he kind of went for it but didn't commit. He feathered and kind of allowed the 8 car to stay, and it just checked up the inside. That accordioned back quite a bit, where a lot of drivers had to check up and could have caused a couple of close moments back in the pack. And meanwhile, Liam Sheen to the outside, and he'll get pushed to the race lead. He'll go right back down to the bottom. The number 36 car now back to the point, as it is a high-speed game of musical chairs on the front row. Looks like the outside line working pretty good so far tonight, as Cole Freilich, who also had a bit of a connection blip, back in the action. He's 4th in line on the outside after that scare.
I was talking to Christian Schauder about this both before the Coke race and as well just yesterday. He felt like the middle line was the better line for drivers, and that in being it doesn't fall back as much compared to, say, last year with this package in its first year on the service. As well, that middle line carries a good amount of speed to where you can gain a car length or so if you have enough cars willing to work together on the middle line. So you're able to carry a good amount of pace, and in turn, it opens up like a conveyor belt type of style racing up there. It's just a matter of you need to have people committed to be able to push a little bit to be able to keep the momentum and energy up on that line. You have them back up, let's say, for even about a car length or 2 to cool off. Usually that kills the momentum for that entire top line for a lap.
And that's where the high-speed game of chess as well comes in, is that you do need to kind of put yourself in the right position for the ebbs and flows of momentum. Say the outside line to back about 2 car lengths. Well, 200, 201, now 202 down the back straightaway. They get all that momentum to get right back up, nose to nose for the inside line. And it stalls back out on quarter entry. Rinse, wash, and repeat. You're on board with Steve Durham in the 10 car. He's 4th in line on that inside.
And you can hear it a little bit with some of the modulation on the throttle, just trying to go a mixture about maybe 3/4 throttle to half a throttle. Make sure he doesn't go too hard, as well as can save some fuel, that he's in the middle of the pack compared to, say, the full throttle at the front of the pack. Just trying to be careful here and not overcook the engine either.
And it's a bit more difficult to do that when you're on the inside. You really need to rely on leaving some space to the car in front of you for clean air to get, at least on the outside. In the case of Bradley Burke right now, you can see him bottom left of your screen pushing the 8 car. Smoke for a minute, thought somebody might have blown up. Is at least on the outside, when you push, you can duck up to the high side to get some clean air by sticking your nose out. If you're Durham on the bottom, you can't really do that because there's a car on your right-hand side. So if you get too hot, you are not in a good position. So he has to be very disciplined on working that throttle to make sure he doesn't get too close to Kato, while also not falling too far back of him for maybe one of those drivers on the outside to dive in and take a spot in line away.
Absolutely. He'd be smart with this, and he may also have, if you leave too much space, someone like a Burke or someone else on that top could just cycle down, as there's a bit of the squeeze method we talked about now being attempted here. They're squeezing Burke out. Scott tried to squeeze up the Ford in front of him.
We saw Freilich get squeezed out a few laps ago. This time it's Bradley Burke. We'll see how aggressive he wants to be on the side draft, but it looks like he's okay with just tucking it back in line, so he'll find himself back by Mogard or so, and he'll drop about 5-6 spots at a turn number 2. But it's still the same group of cars. I mean, this is the same, roughly, guys that we were talking about earlier. Of course, we talked about the big gains for the likes of Durham and for the likes of, some of those other drivers, Dane Cruz, who opted not to come down to the pit lane and gain track position. But other than that, we're kind of back to where we were before the pit cycle, Justin. It is a 13-car lead breakaway, and then everybody else from there on back is kind of in a secondary pack of their own. Sometimes that back-of-the-pack racing more exciting, but for the most part, there are more drivers right now that don't want to go for it than there are that do. There you see the lead breakaway, and then on the right-hand side of your screen, everybody else strung out way behind.
When thinking back to some of the luck of even the best drivers this season, do you blame them? In some of the cases, they've been involved in some of the big ones here, but now Kyle Kamer's been shuffled out here by Fowler and company. They're really trying to shuffle out some of these drivers who have been up towards the front in a bit more of a sketchier spot on the fuel mileage, it seems.
And Kamer was just really high down the back straightaway, and Fowler had a push from Daniel Scott, and the 8-car almost came back down to try to defend his positioning, and that was almost really bad. Instead, he kind of just admitted defeat and got out of the way there. Fowler to the race lead. Second time we've seen John Fowler, Justin, pull out a line to try to take advantage of somebody. Not sure if I would recommend that at this stage in the race. But certainly that goes to show you John Fowler wants to put that car in victory lane. He feels like tonight is his night to do it. Thought about going to the inside. Not open, though, as Sheen's gotten back alongside.
I thought they were going to spin out there because remember in the real-life race just yesterday, so many bump traps, so many cars got loose down the straightaways. That was one of those scary moments where Fowler really was wicked loose. There's another one, again wicked loose, trying to keep the car straight. You usually don't want to bump here in the tri-oval, though, because it's so, well, bumpy in terms of the track surfacing to really shuffle you about. And these cars, once the fuel wears down, can bottom out a little bit under fixed setups.
And it's thinner as well, so you almost feel like you're kind of half on the apron when you're down on the bottom line. It does really unsettle the race car, and if you're, forced to be down there, I think if you can hold it straight, you're fine. But if you get a bump in that position, if you're kind of the middle car and you're the pusher and somebody pushes you, that's when you can find yourself in trouble. So that's the concern with drivers being overly aggressive when they go down to that kind of fourth lane. See, there's only 2 sets of white hash marks in the tri-oval. There you go. Another set appears. That's where that low lane is, where things get a little bit bumpy and those race cars feel a little bit looser than they are, obviously, when they're kind of glued to the racetrack with the big spoilers when they're going around the 30-some-odd degrees of banking here at Talladega. Working lap 24, just the one caution flag so far, and Liam Sheen kind of settling in at the front of the field.
Channeling his inner Brendan Gaughan had some bad luck yesterday. Just about made it out of one of the big ones Gaughan did before Kyle Busch slid up trying to avoid said incident. And, well, Brendan Gaughan had nowhere to go. Looking really strong, and one of the main consistent things about Gaughan in recent years with that Beard Co. machine, with that Beard Oil sponsored car, I should rather say, with South Point on the car usually, has been one thing. He knows how to get the car home clean on the super speedways whenever he's been in that machine. Sheen seems to be channeling that tonight. Smart moves from him so far in the 36, clean moves from him, no major mistakes as they're now 3 wide behind him.
And look at Freilich now, much more aggressive than what we saw out of the last driver that was on that third lane, who kind of just dropped back. Freilich's pinching. Look at Fowler now. He tried to control both lanes. He'll control neither. There's going to be contact. Kato spins. He's into Daniel Scott. A yellow at lap 25. And look out. Here comes everybody else.
Right into the middle of the next pack. Sam Nieto among the drivers involved. We're hearing, man, that was ugly. That wasn't going to work like that.
And we talked about Fowler, in fact, the driver who had made a couple of those moves, Justin, that I didn't think were necessary at this point in the race. He wanted to keep Freilich and Scott behind him, and they did the same move to him that he had done to them earlier. It went 4 wide. Here's the view from Daniel Eberhardt. Way behind, you can see a couple of drivers zipping on through, and other drivers who weren't able to avoid it. Look at the 30-car middle of the road. Rhett McBride somehow involved.
Yeah, some of the cars really struggled to get under braking. Who was that, though, that went just straight, full throttle right through that? That is some... I don't even know how in the world that car made it out of that incident.
Let's go on board with Brett McBride, see how the 5 got caught up in all of this. Here's his view from that second pack. And right there, I mean, by the time he sees smoke, he tries to slow down. You can see Valderrama, a door shot. And that's just a case of Justin. The cars further up the road see the wreck sooner. They check up. And cars that were, you know, actively pushing in the secondary pack just don't see it coming.
Yeah, just not enough time to react in some of those situations, and any overreaction or too much speed and in the smoke really can just lead to mistakes. That was apparently John Ronan, by the way, who just zipped on through. He has to let all these positions back because, well, how about that? A little bit of Days of Thunder mixed into tonight's race.
Yeah, I mean, he's saying, hey man, it worked. Just went to the outside. But yeah, at the moment of caution is when iRacing determines the running order, so it is all going to be for lost. Drivers down pit road, though, for some service, and it looks like Liam Sheen, first driver in, first driver out. So he will maintain no issues there, and for a second consecutive time, Justin, all these drivers fuel only.
Scott McClendon didn't come down this time. He was lucky to knock the previous caution flag. No other lap cars, with this being a quick yellow track. Expecting the Winnebago signal this upcoming time by. And now this is where it gets interesting, Evan, because it's not just as clear-cut as, okay, 4 tires and fuel to make it to the end if we get a green flag stop. Now it's the case where if you are on the track and have a shot to win this race, you're going to need to start number crunching. How much fuel you put in for the stop, if you take 2 tires or no tires or 4 tires still because of the length of the pit stop, all that's going to be crucial now from this stage on, because now you basically have to divide it up to a 47-lap race to try and make it to the end, and that is still very tight to try and navigate where you need to have the numbers for when you have to come down. If you don't have said numbers, that could be the difference between finishing 25th and 5th.
Let's take one more look on board with that incident and ride with that driver right there, the number 00 of Jared Bogard. He was in the 3 wide, and you'll see it happen up the road. There's Fowler trying to control the lanes. Fralick to the outside, Scott to the inside, and I can't tell at that point as he slices to the inside to avoid it, Justin, if Fowler kept kind of drifting when he was 3 wide, or if that 4 wide just wasn't going to fit either way.
I think he drifted a tiny bit down. I think it was a touch bit coming on down. That's the main thing. So it was just very tight, really, in that circumstance. There is space to go 4 wide, but you need to have the right type of drivers, if that makes sense, to have that comfortability there. That time, Fowler just didn't have that comfortability on the top line and just came down that quarter lane, and that was enough to hook him into Scott. You'll see right here.
You can see Scott, I mean, maybe coming up a little bit. He had quite some room to Cato, who was doing his job, holding the double yellow, staying out of the way. And you can see when Cato gets sideways, there's the close call with Mogard, nearly getting into the back of him. And then those cars proceed to crash behind them. And I think that's an incident, Justin, where you can't look at it and say that's the fault of one driver. That's the case of 2, 3 drivers, whatever the number you want to use.
Yeah.
Probably putting a move on that you don't need to be doing not even 30 laps in.
And talk about moves you don't need to be doing not even 30 laps in. We talked about the quickie yellows. When you take the 2 to go signal at Talladega, which is when the pit's open essentially, to the end of the pit lane, since the start and finish line is after said pit exit, you get the signal pit is closed and can get an end of longest line penalty, which can potentially result in an in-race green flag run penalty. McClendon, who is not pit at all this race, is now forced to stay out on the racetrack. This is going to be one move where I think he's going to be regretting this if he doesn't get a quickie yellow.
But you can see how many drivers were down pit road for not necessarily old damage repairs, but I'll say supplemental service, because that outside looks like it's only got maybe a dozen or so cars, if that, up top, and then everybody else strung out single file. Daniel Scott's night comes to an end. He will be the first driver, I believe, to go behind the wall. Adam Benefiel also out of this race. That is very notable for the number 83 machine, Justin, when we talk about, of course, the fight for the Full Throttle Cup, as Benefiel involved in that incident, had some front-end damage and opted that he couldn't fix it. He is also out of this race.
He was involved in the first caution as well when Cadell had that issue trying to stop for the incident. So now, I talked about it at the top of the broadcast. We were expecting potential craziness for the points because this track can be so unpredictable. Guess what? Your points leader entering tonight for the round, out of the race. Daniel Scott, out of the race. Many of the other drivers with significant damage that needed points tonight. And on top of this, you've got a car now leading this group who needs to pit in about maybe 8 to 10 laps. This is going to be potentially hectic here on this green.
If Scott McClendon takes the green flag, we're back underway. 28 down, 47 to go, and you're right. What he's hoping for is a yellow in about 6, 7, 8, 9 laps or so maybe. Bridge himself to another caution, come down pit, be good to the end of the race. If these guys go green, he's going to be on pit road all on his own. And immediately McClendon dropping to the back. Again, he was down, though, a lap right off of the get-go, so it was good for him just to get back on the lead lap at all. But he will drop to the back here, and again, he needs to hope that there's a quick yellow before he runs out of fuel. He's been out there for 28 laps already, granted with some yellows in there, so some opportunities to save, but he doesn't have any more than maybe 15 or so laps on fuel left in that thing, so he needs a relatively quick caution. And as he kind of bows out, let's give it back to Liam Sheen, who's kind of settled in very comfortably here to the race lead. This time, though, Mogard going to split up he and Chambliss.
That's been a really good race so far for Sheen, and we've seen similar pace from him in the night race at Daytona as well, where he showed flashes of it, worked with Dane Cruz a lot during that race as well, when they were in Toyota specifically at the time. So they've got some good numbers. The main thing I'm also curious about is how Steve Durham has been playing this along, because most of his teammates have stayed in the back of the field. He's been the main aggressor from that race team all night long, where he wants to make his name known, it seems, in that 10 machine, the Weatherman.
Yeah, he's got the Doppler Durham on the radar, riding on board with that number 10 Ford Mustang, but with just Cole Freilich up top, I think that those two drivers are going to be hard-pressed to counter against everybody else down low. They'll kind of close up maybe to second, third in line here, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough to go all the way to the race lead. They want somebody like a Kalist, who, for being a top 10 car most of this race, Justin, has been awfully quiet. Haven't talked much about him, but Kyle Trudell right behind him, the number 7 Ford, riding in position number 9. Right at this moment, there are only 2 playoff drivers inside of your top 11.
And part of that's by design, right? To let everything settle things out up front. But I'm always kind of the type of driver who prefers to be up at the front, in that if anything happens around you, you want to be in front of it, where you don't have to worry about getting hit from behind on the checkup, or ended up, let's say, having the car stop in front of you with the track getting blocked. There's that risk when you're in the middle of the pack, but there's the bright side of if you're back there, say, by even a second or so, is it leaves you more time to react compared to, say, the half a second at the very most you'll have if anything happens among these top cars.
And as expected, a couple of laps into the run, the outside to get some strength with Kalist indeed going out there along with Kamer, and we'll fight for the race lead, at least in a breakaway. Right there was a good look at it. That is your top 10 cars broken away from everybody else. Saginaw Phillip 11th, very right side of your screen there, that blue and white car, kind of the lead of the single file, and the disarray from there on back. And I also think, Justin, I tend to be a big fan of this draft package on the service. I think that it does a good job of striking a balance between allowing these drivers to kind of still strategize and to make smart moves to differentiate themselves from others, while also allowing cars to kind of suck up easy enough to promote pack racing. But at no point in this race have we seen one massive pack. Steve Durham's going to get a whale of a push here from Cole Freilich. He's clear in 3, but will not go down to take over the race lead, so he'll hold the top for now. But I mean, it's always been kind of this little breakaway. We haven't seen everybody on top of each other, and to your point, by design, we think.
Yeah, and this has been a package which World's Clean Racing as now Freilich has been shuffled out to the top. The reason he darted up to the top is he wanted Durham to get clear in 3 and 4, I think, Evan, and was starting to overheat. Now he's forced to shuffle his car back to let the engine temps cool, and has just killed all of that momentum on the top line. But to get to the exact point of the package, some of the cleanest races I've seen on the service for super speedway racing has been with this particular package. The runs are decent, yes, to where you're going to have to be careful with how you manage said runs, but there's good throttle response time. You can make multiple lines work if you have the numbers. And as well, the racing in total, I think, has in turn seen minimal incidents in a lot of the races that I've personally seen. Compare that to the last package where it was more difficult to pass and build up a run. Even fix that if you lose the back car, you can lose time, and now we got a caution flag.
The caution is not for the lead pack, trying to find where the yellow actually comes from, and I wonder if it's a car that was involved in an accident and then immediately got off of the racetrack, because I didn't see any smoke, I didn't see any damage. Justin, you got an idea?
Trevor Valderrama just claimed it, and that's because Liam Sheen went spinning off into the grass, in fact, in front of him through the tri-oval the past time by, coming to the 40 to go mark. And I believe if you go to the O2, you'll see a major checkup happen. Yes, indeed, with Nieto with the major checkup. Nieto sent spinning into the grass by Valderrama. Valderrama claiming the caution immediately from that.
Well, we mentioned checkups, and that is a very soft caution. In fact, what a save by Sam Nieto. Because so many times we've seen cars get turned in that spot on the racetrack, and they just blow up the inside wall, but he quickly got on the brakes, straightened it out, and held onto it. Watch how quickly it happens, but also watch this recovery by the two.
Yeah, this was a heck of a recovery here. You need to be right on top of response. Yep, just locked it up just enough. Held the clutch a little bit, just able to get it rolling without going for a full spin. That's enough still to trigger the caution because it was more than 45 degrees in the track. But there is one driver I think who's going to be happy with all that. Scott McClendon can now pit under caution and be on the same cycle as everyone else. The downside is we're in top-off territory to try and make it on the gas.
Yeah, with more yellows, likely able to get to the end, or if you top it off, coming to the one to go to the restart. But also, if you're going to get more yellows to save, you might as well just pit then. So we'll see what the decision is going to be for all the cars up front. It's a slow roll for Liam Sheen at the front of the field. He is going to pit. It looks like most cars agree, but at least one car from up front staying out. That is Cole Freilich. He's been out there, like everybody else, for 9 laps since the last yellow, Justin. I'm not sure if he feels like he can save that much. Maybe banking on, to the point that I just made, if we're going to get more yellows that allow you to save, you might as well have just pitted. Maybe Freilich's hoping that he doesn't have to pit for the rest of the night, and we get 3-4 more yellows, and maybe at the ratio of about using up half the amount of gas under yellow per lap as you would under green, that maybe he can save. And he's not the only one on that decision. It looks like that Dane Cruz maybe towards the back, although as this whole cycle's out, I think, in fact, Cole Freilich may be absolutely on his own. So you want to gamble, you got one.
Fortunately, this is not Las Vegas, and gambles a lot of times can backfire here at Talladega. I'm not sure what Cole may have been thinking here, whether it was he was nervous about smacking into somebody on the entry, or thinking there's going to be some more trouble once, or thinks that drivers can't make it, or might try and come in with the pit closed. I don't understand this call. Because here's the thing, have seen races go to the end about 37 laps. You can make it with about a lap to spare, give or take, if you top off this upcoming time by. I'm surprised he didn't at the very least just roll it through the pit lane and in turn come down without having to serve a penalty this time by.
Yeah, that's kind of a tricky caveat that if you're on the service, but you cannot just coming to the restart to top off. You will get a pit lane penalty, but if you've already been on pit road earlier in that pit cycle, then you will be able to come down and top off. So that's the kind of logic behind driving through. It's a iRacing technicality and the thing that a lot of people on the sim know. So just wanted to add some context to that. But I mean, he needs, if we're assuming that again it's kind of that 50% ratio, he's going to need he's 10 laps in now. If we say he's a lap short, he did 2 laps of yellow before. I'm thinking he needs close to like 15 caution laps.
Maybe.
Which is like 3 to 4 yellows. I don't think that's impossible. Here's a split decision. We talk about the top-offs. You got 4 drivers behind Freilich who stay out, but most everybody else wants to come in. They feel like that 1 lap difference could be the decision maker, so a whole host come down to top off on fuel, and except at the front of the field, the lights are out on top of the pace car. So Freilich, no pits, Kamer, Burke, Davis, Cruz stayed out, and everybody else from behind trickling in for a top off.
Yeah, and that should make everyone else okay on the field. The main thing that's going to be the concern is if there is a green-white checkered, because that's where, if say we get an air yellow, we might see even more cars elect to top off, because it's still going to be very tight to even make it through 1 attempt, let alone a couple attempts. So that's something a lot of drivers this week have planned out is, can I make it in case we get a late race caution flag in a race such as this?
And Trent Valderrama, you mentioned claiming responsibility for the incident. First time we've seen that tonight, so he'll receive an end of the longest line penalty. He'll go all the way behind all the lapped cars for this restart at lap number 38. And just to kind of touch on that incident one more time, we had talked a little bit about that lower lane in the tri-oval earlier in this race. Well, you saw what happened. I said that I'm not concerned down there on my own, Justin, but I am concerned if I get a hit in there, and I think that's what attributed to the 2-car spinning around so quickly. Sam Nieto was the yellow, basically. It was Valderrama who turned him, but Nieto basically was the caution. 4 laps later, he will restart. There he is, position 6.
Yeah, he didn't elect to top off, surprisingly. But here's the thing. Before that caution flag, Jeremy Miller had quietly moved into the lead pack at one moment, despite having all that damage. So surprisingly, some of these cars have been able to deal with said damage very well this week. I've seen some drivers with some decent dents to the back end or even on the side of the car still be very quick. The main concern again is how quick are they if they're the lead car. If you really damage, say, the front fenders or damage the downforce, so to speak, of the car, or more so the splitter or the spoiler, that's where the main concern is if you are someone behind them trying to work with them, because that can hold you up by a mile an hour or two, which is big at Talladega.
Funny, we talk about how this is the race where anybody could win it. We've seen some really torn-up race cars win these races, but at the same time, you do want a good car underneath you. There are only 3 drivers on the outside. Everybody else strung out to turn 4. Single file as we're back underway. This restart just past halfway. You got to get 37 laps to get home.
And already, Nieto being left out to dry by a significant amount. In fact, some of the drivers didn't even catch up to the rest of the lead pack. They're about 2 seconds back, as already, for the race lead, they're battling back and forth.
A big slice to the inside. It was Kamer in the 8 who came from the outside to the inside to take over the race lead from the 87 of Freilich. Freilich went back up to the outside, but now he's got no help. So everybody else in line single file. He'll drop 1. He'll drop 2 as Nieto fills that gap. Chambliss also going to come on through. What a run it's been for Brian Chambliss, searching for redemption after having that win stolen from him a week ago in Las Vegas.
That's definitely a motivator to try and say, I know I had the winning strategy and the winning car. It just came down to maybe a quarter to half a mile to determine if I could have won that race. That's going to push you a lot as a competitor. But speaking of pushes, Davis has also been very strong. Remember, with that strong race at Daytona to get into the postseason, he's got Bradley Burke to work with. He's got one of the few teammates lined up at the front here.
And what a duo, make it a trio, because Burke pushed him so far out in front to the race lead that Sam Nieto had space to come down and take over those top 3 spots, but they go right back to the outside. Nieto contact with Freilich as he and Kamer almost got each other hooked together in the tri-oval. What a close call. Here comes Durham through line. He'll knock Nieto into the fence, and it's a huge mess in turns 1 and 2.
Well, we talked about leaving space, and some drivers will try it up the middle. I don't know what in the world Durham was thinking in that situation. Just tried to thread the needle at full throttle just about, with some of the cars checking up. Just sent Nieto into the wall, and Nieto just pinballed down to the rest of the lead pack.
Yeah, Sam Nieto had avoided the close call where he, Kamer, and Freilich all had nearly come together. It checked them up, and as you mentioned, it was Steve Durham who saw this. So watch this from up top, and you'll see Durham up the road right there, hits Nieto, comes down. Those cars don't stand a chance. They're involved, but then more cars spin as the size of that wreck about doubled with those second pack getting involved. Justin, I thought the whole point of that second pack was hanging back, so if there's a wreck, you're not in it. But the last 2 yellows, secondary pack got involved anyways.
What did I say as well? The risk that the track gets blocked in situations like this, and where drivers trying to check up or lock up the brakes, for example, end up rear-ended hard or end up smashing into somebody. So that's, again, why I prefer staying at the front and in front of trouble like this. Grant Davis and Bradley Burke are probably thinking that at the moment.
They are enjoying the clean air up at the front of the field because at lap number 42, they're hanging out. And now, here's the point I made on the last yellow. Now you can make it the distance, no question, on fuel. Our only question was Cole Freilich, and the yellows would help him, but his night is done as he'll go to the garage after the 87 machine was involved in that incident, so that's not going to matter. But with everybody having topped off, you really don't need to come in and get anything more on this yellow. So anybody pitting going to be kind of just for damage, I would think, at this point.
Or just saying, you know what, things are getting too crazy. I want to get away from the craziness. And that's exactly what some of these cars are doing here. Davis and
see,
Burke.
this surprises me, but I wonder, Justin, if it's because they want extra for overtime.
Yes, that's also a major factor too, as I mentioned. Because they would have been close for the GWCs. Now, they should be good if there's a caution flag or 2.
If there's 1 or 2, as you mentioned, granted, we could have as many as 3 attempts at overtime. You figure 2 lap attempts each. There are more, trying to think of the way to say it. There's more, obviously like 4 or 5 caution laps in between each attempt. You need about, 5 to get 1 attempt in, 10 to get 2, 15 to get more. And I think that, looking at that, it works because everybody pitted, Justin.
Yeah.
I think if those guys up front came in thinking, hey, we should get some extra fuel for some overtime, but nobody else did, then you really screwed yourself. Because the way this race has gone, with all the yellows we've had in the opening 43, we've probably got a lot still to go in the 33 that are still left on the board. But because everybody pitted, I guess it's okay. I would just worry about saving fuel under the yellows that are to come. At least on this point on, I would only be pitting for damage.
Yeah, now I get that exact point. And that's kind of the mindset I would have as well at this point if I was on the track. If I'm not involved in a crash, I'm not coming down the rest of the way. That's got to be the main kicker here. Because you're going to be okay, potentially for the GWCs, as long as you clutch and coast under the caution flags, you will potentially make that mark. But as well, you never know if you're going to get the track position back if you pit. Unless you have someone really willing to push you hard through the pack, and that's easier said than done in this race tonight.
Steve Durham debating on if he wants to claim the caution. Of course, if he does, he'll get an end of the longest line of penalty. If he doesn't, and a post-race review says that he was at fault, then he will receive 2 penalty points. Just as a housekeeping note, I want to take a look at what the penalty points are coming into this evening, just so I can kind of keep track of where that is. I don't think Steve Durham is in a position where that is a concern to him. Granted, when I want to pull up the penalty points for me, everything doesn't want to load. Yep. But taking a look at what Steve Durham's got coming into this race, he is not actively on the penalty point system, so he's not worried about it. Drivers who I would caution would be guys like Mogard, because Mogard, it's his first race back from a suspension, Justin, so he resets to 4 penalty points. If he gets to 7, he's parked for a week, but he's also on probation for the rest of the year. He and Burke both are on probation for their part in that intentional wrecking at Darlington. So even if you claim it, it's 2. If you don't claim it, it's 4, and that puts you over the limit. You're parked again for another week.
And that affects really how you may drive at a track such as this, because you be over-aggressive and you cause an incident, you basically are done, essentially, right? In terms of potential possibilities, etc. So it just plays into things, as Durham has indeed elected to claim the caution flag now, Evan, after having discussions, I believe, with some of his fellow drivers and seeing some of the tape to realize, oh hey, it wasn't wise to go full throttle through 3 wide to try and take the lead.
So he will drop to the back. Some drivers asking to one another on the radio how their damage is, trying to figure out what is still attached to those race cars. You can see Durham there below the yellow line dropping. He's got to go all the way to the back for this restart. And, I mean, fortunately, a lot's happened in 44 laps. I'm sure a lot's going to happen in the 31 laps that are still left to go in this race, Justin. But this is kind of, I think, what a lot of drivers had discussed pre-race that they were worried about, is they thought this race was going to be messy. We haven't had that one wreck that's taken out 20 cars, 30 cars, but several small to medium wrecks have, kind of really thrown people behind the 8 ball.
And I think part of the reason for the aggression is, and we've seen it specifically for the super speedway race at Daytona in the Coke Series a few weeks back, in fact a month or so back, once drivers knew what their point situations were, they drove very hard in that race, where they were fighting hard. There was a lot of big incidents, there was a lot of bold moves. Drivers know if they make any mistakes or lose a ton of points here by being even too conservative, it can cost them a chance of going to the round of 8 if they're in the playoff spots. I think that's a factor, but some of the drivers are up to the front for the first time, like Andrew Freenosh.
4th caution of the afternoon behind us. The green flag's in the air. Let's try it again.
Oh, the wrecking! Hold on, the wrecking in the tri-oval.
It's way in the back. There's a lot of drivers chatting about it on the radio. The inside just did not go, and a couple of drivers got turned around. It looked like it was Stanford and Jeremy Miller.
Yeah, there was a massive check at the back of the field. That's why there's not many cars here in the pack, and so many are strangled about. It started behind Trevin Valderrama, where in turn, Joseph Tice was involved in the stack-up. A couple others were stopped on the racetrack, including Stanford, McBride, Miller, as mentioned, and Durham. This has now allowed the lead pack, instead of having about, say, 29 cars in it, just about 24, spread apart by 3 seconds, with how many cars had to stop at the brakes.
Yeah, maybe the one point of the race where we thought some of those drivers that have been hanging back were going to get back into it. There's the checkup. Watch it there, and you can see it happens once. They all check up, and then it happens again right there. And I think, Trevin Valderrama there, Justin, had rear-ended Sam Nieto in that same spot on track earlier. So maybe he's thinking, I don't want to run somebody over again. Takes it a little bit easier than the cars behind were expecting, and it was kind of a 1 and then a 2 checkups back to back, and you can see how strung out it is. The top 15 cars or so within contact of your race leaders, but everybody else is hanging way back. And you talk about new faces up front. How about Andrew Pellegrini? He's still got his Darlington throwback paint scheme on, because that's the last race he ran in this series, in the 47, being pushed on the outside by Liam Sheen.
And he continues to find some friends, Sheen does, it seems, and what a push as well. Dylan Jones now among the drivers working up front. We've mentioned Freenosh. Also seeing now that Eberhardt's working their way up forward. We've talked about it a little bit in the past. Usually when drivers know they're good on fuel, they'll start to push the tempo. Sheen trying to cool it off as the teammates bobbled hard down the bottom.
Yeah, Burke was all over the 24, and on the outside, Liam Sheen over the radio saying, "I'm too hot." He had to back off. That was such a good push to the back of Pellegrini. They came from so far behind for Pellegrini, I should say, but the 36 got too hot. He had to back off. Jared Bogaerts going to fill that role, but it did kill the momentum for the drivers on the outside, at least for just a moment. So this time by Sheen now. He'll go high to low, tuck and line to be the fourth car on the inside. And here's those new names that we haven't talked a ton about. The 90 of David Washington, fourth in line up top. The 90 of Daniel Eberhardt. I think the only time we've talked much about him was when he avoided an incident earlier in this race. He comes into this one as one of the best drivers all year with 4 wins, but Justin below the cut line, 11th out of the 12 drivers in the playoffs. He needs a big race here tonight, and he's finally in a spot to do it.
And he was in a position to win that race at Las Vegas last week until he went full throttle in the back end of Andrew Freenosh and a couple other cars trying to get by them on a different tire strategy. Now, he's forced into the catch-up role, and this is the type of race where he needs to be able to get these points, because I think as a competitor, if you aren't as comfortable on a road course, let's say, you don't want to rely on the Roval because it's such a difficult track and such an unpredictable track with how the banking is, with the backstretch chicane and so forth. It can be tricky, and this is why so many cars are starting to work their way up to the front, as well as the fact that, well, you don't want to make the move too late and have to work your way up from, say, 20th to try and get the lead in only 10 laps.
Yeah, there's a perfect balance. These drivers, at least most of them, not Grant Davis, but most other drivers, don't want to be up front for the whole race. But is this the point? 26 to go? If you were hanging back, I still think it's a little bit early. Again, this is a very short Talladega race lap-wise, 75 laps. It's not a sprint, don't get me wrong, but only 200 miles is not a long race. So, you know, we're only 50 laps in. I still feel like it might be a little bit early, but especially with all the incidents we've had, but there's a reason why these are the guys fighting for the Full Throttle Cup and not me. And since, you know, Pellegrini had that huge run on the outside when he was pushed by Sheen, hasn't been great since. He and David Washington trying to get synced up. These are cars that have stayed behind and stayed clean, which should really help them.
And it's important to be able to keep the car clean, as we talked about, but here's the interesting caveat. In the race last Tuesday for the Coke Series, a lot of drivers felt they needed to start making their moves on lap 6 even. Others, they were just content on taking the point, say even a 25th place finish, and saying, I feel like that's enough for what I need to do, rather than, say, wreck and finish in 40th position. You have to weigh that out, I think, too, for this type of race tonight, because do you want to be able to gain some good points for the playoffs, or do you want to be able to try and fight for the race win but risk putting yourself in the big one and up into the catch fence?
And these are the risks, the calculated risks, that these drivers are trying to figure out what the answer is going to be. Of course, there is that win in, you're in. We had it all regular season. That's the big thing that Eberhardt's chasing, that Grant Davis is chasing. He came into tonight 9th in the championship, 4 points behind Trudell for the elimination bubble. Especially drivers who know ahead of time that they are not feeling good headed to the Roval next week. You want the points now. Lap traffic 3 wide. That's Jeremy E. Miller going a lap down up high. I thought for a moment Pellegrini may have been clear to the inside. Instead, he'll hold the middle.
Yeah, that close scenario just really scrambled up that whole top line, but look who's coming up in said top line. Scott McClendon's now making his move. We mentioned he started a lap down in this race. He's back up inside the top 12, enjoying the tail end of that top line, which is starting to die out a bit.
Started a lap down and then found himself off cycle, but got the yellow flag he needed to get fuel. Now Pellegrini no longer the leader of the outside. It's the driver who pushed him up there who just pulled up in front of him. The 36 of Liam Sheen already shouted out to that Brendan DeGon throwback, the tribute paint scheme, if you will, the same car he drove this weekend in his final NASCAR Cup Series start. Not often, Justin, in a Talladega race can you kind of, pinpoint 1 or 2 drivers who have been better than everybody else, but Grant Davis and Liam Sheen have been the class of the field tonight, and they hope that they can close it out.
Yeah, they've made smart moves. They've been able to work with several different types of drivers, whether it's teammates or drivers even that they may not have as much chemistry with. It's how they've controlled this race, which is why there's some of the drivers to keep an eye on for these final 22 laps or so. Now it's the matter, though, of who ends up joining the fray, because that's going to be the true test to see how do you react when you have drivers potentially taking you 3 wide when we get towards the closing stages here with so many different drivers wanting to make moves. Here comes some moves from the backdrop. Eberhard and McClendon are coming in quick with Soro.
Yeah, they're working the outside. McClendon does have a pretty big bit of rear-end damage, so it's going to make it difficult for Steve Soa there to push him. So that could be a challenge if it comes to the end of the race when these drivers really get aggressive. Something else I'm noticing on the outside is Pellegrini really is not being that aggressive with Sheen. Sheen pushed him so much so that the 36 started blinking red, and he had to pull out of line. The 47 doesn't have that same sense of urgency. I think the 47 more so racing with the correct number of laps to go. With just 21 to go that time by, I don't think you need to push it that hard. If he sits where he is now, a couple of feet off of the bumper, that outside may not go to the race lead, but they're certainly not going to lose a ton, and that's critical.
Massive check on the bottom side there with Dane Cruz with a bit of trouble. That nearly caused a big one. But man, I think part of it too is keeping the temperatures cool enough to where he can push for several laps as a driver, rather than, say, push for the back stretch, have to cool it off down the front, lose momentum. Push on the back off in the front. So I think, again, just try to keep it towards, say, the 240s on oil temp to then be able to reel him in and push hard for about 3-4 straight laps to try and get him clear.
More traffic up high. It's a damaged Sean Kalist. He will also now drop to a lap down, riding in the number 28 position. So you saw that brief moment there where Dane Cruz had a bit of a connection issue. I think also I saw a brief one for Andrew Pellegrini. I know we joke about Talladega being a tricky spot, I guess, for spotters in real life, because when they're right here on the backstretch, the spotters are more than a mile away. I guess the joke could be tonight, the track's so big that the routers are struggling for some of these drivers, but they're working okay. They got more traffic coming up, and that traffic, if it holds the outside, should not be an issue. Look at the 90, though. Daniel Eberhard gonna force the issue. He'll squeeze Pellegrini out. Now maybe we're in trouble. They're gonna be 4 wide with traffic holding the outside. McClendon also forcing his way through. Pellegrini got bullied that lap.
And he left a space in between the cars, and that's one of the risks you take. Some people like to get as close as they can to the line to prevent that from happening. And now, Liam Sheen's got a great pusher in Eberhard who's trying to get him clear and in turn try and control the top line if he can get it built back up, if he can push Sheen clear.
I mean, he's trying. That's what he wants to do, and you can see with just those 2 up there, though, they lost a lot of their support, and as Pellegrini falls back, who knows? If you then need to rely on the 47 later in this race for help, he's probably not going to help you out because you didn't help him. That's where teammates like Burke, like Davis, working so closely together is helpful, as the Donnie of Eberhard's going to leave now the 36 out to dry. Daniel Eberhard's got one objective, Justin. That is to win this race, not to make friends. He is using everybody up, and he is top 5 now for the first time today.
And this is going to be tricky, though. Take a look up the road. Those are 4-lap cars, and they are staying on the bottom side. This can be tricky here. Some drivers like it up top. Real-world drivers like it on the bottom. This can be tricky for some of the drivers if they try and merge along with them as they try and swallow them up.
Stanford, Durham, Tice, and McBride all going to hold the inside. It's not going to be an issue for these lead cars. They've got the speed differential. They pass, they dive to the bottom, and they clear. But these mid-lead pack cars are going to be stuck alongside those lappers, and I think that's where it could be an issue. Guys like Trudell on the back going to be a little bit more annoyed with them than your leaders were. They have every right to hold the bottom. They want to lose less time. That's the way to do it. But it does make things a little bit more dicey than maybe they needed to be, as you can see more of those lead lap cars now passing that slow group, diving back down to the inside and trying to ride. So now the outside is led by Eberhard, Dane Cruz in the middle, and the number 36 of Liam Sheen in line behind, as those 24 and the 95 cannot stay hooked up. Here comes the 90.
Great shove now from Dane Cruz and having Liam Sheen with them again. Two teammates hooked up behind Eberhardt. This question, does Eberhardt take it? Yes.
New race leader, lap 60 of 75, and it is Daniel Eberhardt. Started this race after not queuing up in 21st. Hung out all night long, 15 laps away from a possible win and a ticket into the round of 8. He wants to get that illustrious first career Full Throttle Cup here in 2020. But you've got spoilers all around him. Still, only Eberhardt and Davis are the only playoff drivers running inside of the top 10 right now. And here comes Jonathan Cadell to the outside. He is pushed by Mogard. He was in a wreck earlier in this race. Now he's fighting for the race lead.
Where did he come from? Last I checked, he was about 3 to 5 seconds behind the whole pack. All of a sudden, he's gotten some help, but Mogard's help just left him out to dry. Cadell needs to have somebody willing to shove him here. He does have John Rodden in this pack, but it's going to need to be a focused attack if he wants to make some moves here.
And then outside died off as well, so Mogard, who is pushing Cadell, bailed on him, went to the middle, and it dropped Cadell back. You can see he's about 7th or so in line on the outside. More drivers entering the picture. A little bit of a damage to number 23 of Matthew Mara in the picture. I see the number 75 of Steve Soa, race winner just last Wednesday, in the RealSimRacing Outlaw Truck Series from Eldora. He rides 12th behind Washington, so all these cars who have been staying clean feel like now's the time to go. But most critically up front, they have separated Burke and Davis. And I think if they can keep those two split apart, that helps everybody else's chances.
Yes, it means they don't have as big of the help as they may have expected before, which was so crucial to them controlling the bubble, because teamwork is so critical for doing that. Because if you time it up right, you have one driver who runs on the bottom, then one driver who goes up to the top, rotates up in front. Then when the top line slows down, that other teammate usually cycles back up atop and rotate. They haven't done that too much tonight. At the same time, not too many cars have been able to clear them on by unless they get a massive shove. Now, they won't have that massive shove, especially with some of these cars electing potentially to have to really cool off soon. And now, some Alliance members, some corporate teammates hooked up on the outside, and Eberhardt along with Kamer.
And it's big for those drivers to have a little bit of help. You can see Mogard working with them as well. Mentioned his first race back after serving a 3-race suspension. He wants to make a point that he can win races when it matters in the postseason, and kind of prove to these guys that if he can get there again in 2021, he'll be a threat. What a move to the inside, though. Daniel Eberhardt, with no more than an inch to spare, came down across the nose of Grant Davis. So now he works as the lead car on the inside once more. It is now just Kamer and Mogard up top. Behind them, the 98 of Washington is trying to get Scott McLennan up there, Justin, but that back-end damage I mentioned on the 22 is just making it so difficult. That red and white Ford, your race leader, which means there's another set of 4-lapped cars holding the bottom that are about to get in the way. Looks like at least one of the moves is Trevin Valderrama. This will be tricky.
Well, this isn't going to be easy to try and navigate, as they almost smacked into him at the top of turn 4. Looks like they'll be able to get on by easily for the rest of them. That could have been tricky already. Fight for the race lead back on.
And it's Eberhardt who gets forced out. The 24 and Davis gets underneath, and he'll go to the race lead after he dove under Eberhardt, who moved up to yield to the lap traffic. So lap traffic helping the 24. Davis back to the lead next time by. Going to be 10 laps to go from Talladega Super Speedway. A race win. And if you're a playoff driver, a ticket to the round of 8 hangs in the balance. But only Davis, Eberhardt, Washington, your only playoff drivers in the top 15.
And this is going to be crucial what moves you make. Liam Sheen with the smart one there, waiting for the corner exit, come up right in front of Eberhardt, force him to push you. Not enough time, though, for Dane Cruz to come up with them. Now they have a chance to fight hard. The rest of the drivers behind them have not been able to really sort each other out, who are about a half a second behind. That's going to take time. Massive check.
Oh, he's way up to the outside while Liam Sheen caught it, though, before he ended up into the fence. What a save to keep that car on track. Even Daniel Eberhardt, who's the one who nearly dumped him, giving him some props on that save. And Liam Sheen lucky to still be in this thing. So are all those cars behind him.
And again, many cars have been getting loose when getting bump drafted this week at times, depending on how you build them, specifically some of the Chevys. And now, this is going to be scary for some of these cars. That top line, though, has been able to reform pretty quickly. The downside is Sheen's now the third car in the line rather than the lead car, who could have had the lead if that didn't happen by the corner exit down the backstretch.
Yeah, it's just being aggressive. We knew that Eberhardt was going to be aggressive. Nobody shocked about that one. How about John Rodden now? Insert another new name. He is second in line on the outside. He is going to give Eberhardt a big push. He might clear now. By the time we get to 3, no, he can't get in front of the 24. He will hold. It's in Sheen's best interest. It's in Mogard's best interest. Everybody else high side to help that line go. You're hoping that you can push the lead car of the outside of the lead so that they drop down, get out of your way, and then you can try it. But you can see Rodden, he needs some clean air. He's too hot, and Liam Sheen thought about squeezing him out, but reconsidered.
And you can see on screen how tight that was. What a save by Sheen and all that. You normally don't want to get pushed in the corner on iRacing and at these super speedways because it can knock you loose. That time it really sent him sideways, and now we have some tandem drafting hooking up. Freenosh and Jones hooked up to get to the top line. Trudell's now hooking up with Kaczynski now to get into this fight, as well as more lap traffic ahead.
We talked about the importance of having help. There's not many teammate duos left. Soa working with teammate into Pellegrini, but they're too far behind. And at this point, if you're top 10, you got to go with whoever. Here comes the 8 car, came to the outside. And you mentioned this name, Justin, about 10 laps ago. How about Andrew Ferdinand? He'll join the party with some left rear damage. And here comes the third line. Trudell's there. So is that 30 car of Michael Kaczynski. He's non-committal, though, but they're trying to get a third line going. And for the first time tonight, racing 3 wide for the race lead.
And it's important to be able to hold this line. I think they have the numbers though, Evan, because the speed really good in the corners. They're not even losing time in the straights. That's how, in the corners I should say, that's how quick they are, and that's how much time they're gaining back on the straights.
And they need a lot from Kaczynski here. If he bails, they should go on board with the Mara, 5th in line on the inside. If that outside loses any single car, they're going to lose a lot. But if they can stay aggressive, they have a real shot at this thing. Eberhardt leads. He'll drop from the middle to the bottom, control the field at lap number 70. But the Ada Cam are leading the third line, so close he can feel it. They lost some ground in 1 and 2. Here's the cross back now. Grant Davis back to the middle line. He'll get a push by John Rodden, and he'll rocket back past the 90.
And what some amazing bump drafting here and tandem drafts here. Whoever feels like they can get a run to somebody, they can get it moving. To say the very specific part you see on the front bumper, hit them with that razzle-dazzle, that's what these drivers are doing and then some.
And look at Dylan Jones now. He'll go way to the outside. Looks like Rodden trying to look under the 90. There wasn't room. Now you're on board with Dylan Jones. Another one of those drivers who comes into this closer to the bubble than we would like to be. Only 6 points ahead of the cut line. 6th in the championship standings. But his line fades. He's all on his own up there, and he'll fall all the way outside of the top 10.
I think he thought there was going to be someone who went with them instead, all the way to the back of the line. That may take him out of the conversation for the win, but that doesn't mean the third line isn't going to come back into play. Some of these drivers may be waiting for the right time. In fact, Kamer saying, it's now my time to peek out to the outside. No one's with him now.
I'm surprised he committed because sometimes drivers will only go up about a half a lane or so. He's able to get his spot back, but oftentimes they'll kind of go up half a lane just to see if anybody else is going to come with them to test the waters. He went all the way up. He looked like he was ready to go. Frenage didn't join him. Fortunately enough for the gate, his spot was still there when he wanted to change his mind and get back down in line. And now we're in a stalemate. 2 rows. You can see Jones trying to convince cars to go to a third lane, but so far, no takers. This lead pack breakaway as Mogard in and out, got a little bit squirrely. This is a lead pack, 15 cars strong.
And I think some of the tires are starting to go away on some of these cars. They aren't as big of a factor in terms of speed, but they are a factor in terms of how much grip you'll have off the corner and as well entering the corner. That's going to make it tricky now to be able to navigate some of these moves here. May see some drivers duck out to take it 3 wide, coming to 2 to go.
Yeah, Popsicle 6 in the air the next time by. Of course, they need to get to the white for this race to be official. Otherwise, up to 3 attempts at overtime. Here comes Eberhardt. He's pushed by John Rodden on the outside line. Clear into turn number 3. A late dive to the inside, but it's his. So Eberhardt now controlling the bottom. Still just 2 wide. No room, and Davis comes up. Davis turns across Rodden into the outside wall, and this race will go to overtime.
And what a tough break there. What a finish here, which is about to come up here. Just right there. Bit of a tiny drift up, bit of a push down from Rodden. Racing incident as they both collide and hard into the wall. Rodden getting the worst of it. Davis, minimal damage, I believe.
And you knew Rodden was going to be pinched because he saw what happened last time Daniel Eberhardt went to lead on the bottom. Is the 24 pulled out from behind him, got the push from the outside, and went back to the race lead. So Rodden's thinking, if I want to win this race, I can't let the 24 get back in front of me. He holds him down, and I don't know if the 24 was committing Justin or if he just pushed up a little bit, but either way, he comes up into Rodden. Let's watch it from high above.
I think just the tiny drift up with the tiny drift down for Rodden, like I said, but the main concern is we've seen the last shot, Kamer had some door-to-door contact trying to dodge that. Kaczynski nearly smacked the wall trying to dodge that as well. A couple drivers getting some damage in the massive checkups here. You see right about here, just the tiniest of drift downs and the tiniest of drift ups is enough to send them both hard in towards the wall.
And that is a tough break for Grant Davis, not only in, of course, he wants to fight for the race win in this, but realistically, you look at the guys that he's racing against. Davis with 1 top 5, 2 top 10s on the year, Justin. That is the lowest in each respective category, aside from Brian Chambliss, who doesn't have a top 5 yet this year and is higher than him in the points. Davis is an underdog. You know, he needs to be in a position to get big points, even if he wasn't going to win this race. The points was going to be the big thing for him. He falls down to now about 20th. Still can make up points in overtime, but that is a huge hit to his playoff hopes.
Yeah, he actually came down to the pit lane. Believe me, have some damage repair in, not trying to get tires on the car, but it's not over yet, but he'll have to start at the very least in about 17th, if not 18th, or as far back as 20th from all this. So it's just a matter of hoping to avoid any trouble, because who knows? We may see drivers fan out 3, 4, 5, 6, 25 wide with how crazy this race can be at the finish here. And again, it takes the lap to get up to speed, but usually when the white flag flies, a lot of stuff can happen, as we've seen in many cases this season in every type of series on the service.
And that's Talladega. You get to the white flag. There is no maybe a yellow comes if there's a hard enough wreck in the sim. You get to the white, you just have to be the first car back around. And, you know, you mentioned that. Well, I said Steve Soa won our Outlaw Truck Series race at Eldora last Wednesday. He was 6th. At the white flag. Everybody else starts getting into each other, some spins, and he wins that race at a photo finish. Who is to say that we don't see the same here on the high banks of Talladega Superspeedway. And talking about the Outlaw Truck Series, next race is this Wednesday from Gateway, so that'll be a fun race. But we also just announced today that registration is now open for the 2020-21 RealSimRacing Icebreaker Winter Series. It'll be a 10-race championship right here on RaceSpot TV coming later this year in the off-season for the Cup Series. So if you want to get on track and get involved, you can go to RealSimRacing.org or follow on any of the RealSimRacing social channels for more information on how you can register and go racing with us for that 10-week championship beginning this November. So a lot of options for drivers who want to get on track, but of course the objective right now, the Full Throttle Cup. And as we wait to see if the lights will go on top of the pace car this time by, could be a big moment for Daniel Eberhardt.
Choosing the top here, wants to work with Kyle Kamer to get a good shove here and then get themselves maybe to the bottom side. So this is going to be important how you time this up, as we talked about. As well, we talked about tire spin. If you hit the gas too hard with worn tires this week, especially since the restart box is in the exit of the trial with all those bumps, there have been cases where drivers have looped it, and not just from checkups. This is not going to be the easiest of starts here for tonight, and whoever gets the best launch here may in turn be able to try and win this race. If the cars behind get a decent launch and be able to set themselves up, for example, that's going to be critical for how they all time this up with the gas. This is going to be fun.
It'll be a 2-lap to go restart. Just reminding these drivers, since we've been doing a lot of comparing to this weekend's race in the NASCAR Cup Series, that those same rules do apply here in Real Sim Racing competition, that you cannot pass or advance your position below the double yellow line. So you do have to work in those parameters. I like to think with how wide Talladega is, especially compared to Daytona, these drivers should be able to do so, but I did want to mention that if maybe you don't tune in all the time here to RSR or to iRacing, and happy that you're joining us on RaceSpot TV on the iRacing Esports Network, especially if you're just tuning in now, you are here at a good time, because it is going to be attempt number 1 at overtime. The 90s, your leader, he just chose to go to the outside. Justin, did we get it done here?
There's likely the chance, because a lot of times you really need to make a ton of mistakes if you want to have a caution flag on the first lap of GWC at Talladega. But it's usually the second lap, once we get the white, where things just have gone pandemonium-wise. I think we get to the white flag. From that point on, though, I don't know how many cars can make it back.
Let's see how this shakes out. The pace car is down and in. It is attempt number 1 at Real Sim Racing Overtime. And it is playoff driver Daniel Eberhardt in control. That is the number 90 Ford Mustang on the outside of the front row. Mogard, Cruz, Kamer, Burke, the rest of your top 5. Green flag. We're underway. 2 laps to go.
And a perfectly executed timing to be able to get that launch, and everyone on the bottom side just caught completely sleeping Evan.
So the outside line is going to duck down. The 90, then the 8 car. They're going to work on the bottom, but did they get too far out in front? How long is it going to take the rest of the cars to catch up? Mogard darts to the outside, but Dane Cruz doesn't follow. The 46 holds on the bottom. So it'll be -1 for Mogard. He tucks back in line. A top 4 breakaway, but here comes Bradley Burke from 5th. Nearly spun off the nose of Friedrich, but he saves it.
Hard push again in the middle of the corner. Here comes that line, though. This is what Cruz has been waiting for. Eberhardt needing to block the bubble.
Tried to go high to block the top, couldn't do it. He comes back down in front of Kyle Kamer, side by side of the stripe. White flag in the air. This race is official. Dane Cruz pushed by the double O of Jared Mogard in a spin. It's Kyle Kamer around. It's a wreck behind, but we're racing for the checkered, and Eberhardt's got no help.
And once again, bumping in the middle of the corner. Usually is a recipe for disaster. Now for the lead cars, though. What a shot by Mogart. The whole bottom line miscombobulated. This could get crazy through the tri-oval.
Mogart's pushing. Don't count out Eberhard and Burke. They're third and fourth, but are they too far behind? The double on Watson. Oh, he'll turn the 46. Mogart cruise into the fence. Daniel Eberhard side by side with Bradley Burke to the line, and Eberhard wins at Talladega and advances to the round of 8. What a wild final lap.
What did I say? We get to the line and then anything can happen. Well, just about everything that can happen, happened. Eberhard controlled the bubble for portions of this race once he worked his way to the front, and in turn, able to stay out of the most amount of trouble at the stripe to win this race after, well, just about everyone else around him caught on fire.
There were several wrecks on that final lap, and our producer downstairs, who could have wasted a good job of making sure that you saw most of it on the split screen there, down the back straightaway. And now the only intentional trip through the grass on the afternoon, as Daniel Eberhard has won race number 5 on 2020, tying Andrew Ferdinand for a series best. And he becomes the first playout driver to lock himself in to the round of 8. And he does it, so Justin, as you mentioned, after a disastrous end to a great race he had last week at Las Vegas, came into tonight below the cut line, and he will leave with a very relaxing trip to the Charlotte Roval coming up next Monday night.
And I think for him and his fellow drivers, one of the main thoughts is going to be, finally. Because 9 times out of 10, we've seen drivers, including Eberhard, get into massive big ones where they talked about in 2019. Stayed up at the front, stayed at the back of the field, tried everything. Tonight, in turn, the luck comes into play right at the right moment for the 90.
And as he parks it on the front straightaway, let's take a look at our full race results. It is Eberhard with Burke, 3/100ths of a second. The Martin sheet of victory atop Burke with Trudell third. We'll talk with all of them in just a few moments. Matt Barr, David Washington, Thomas George through P6. How about good finishes for Liam Sheen? Probably should have won this race based on how he was all night long. Not in the cards. Good results for Pellegrini, Soa top 10, and Grant Davis rounds out your top 10.
Philip finishes in 11th after a crazy run to the finish. Trevin Valderrama up to 12th, one of his best finishes of the year. Started in 35th. Andrew Freenash among the many drivers who was caught up in Calamity Corner. Or Calamity Corners, I should say, for 13th. Scott McClendon slid through the grass for 14th. Kyle Kamer involved in one of those major spins with a bump draft in the middle of the corner. Finishes in 15th. Dan Cruz finishes in 16th after having a shot to win the race before he was sent up into the sky. Still finished 17 seconds back. Kaczynski, Jones, Cadell, and Mogart, the last cars on the lead lap in your top 20.
And continuing on through playoff names, the likes of Stanford, Michael Araya, Joseph Tice, and Brian Chambliss. And that's not all, because if we go to the last page, Adam Benefield came into tonight as your points leader, which helps. But a P34 finish tonight from Talladega does not, and he is going to be in a precarious position headed in to the final race of this round next week from Charlotte Motor Speedway. So we'll take a quick opportunity to step aside. When we come back, we will talk with your top 3 finishers and preview that round of 12 finale from the Roval next week. You've been watching RaceSpot TV's continuing coverage of the 2020 RealSimRacing Full Throttle Cup Series, powered by Boosted. Daniel Eberhard, your race winner at Talladega. was the run to the checkered flag by Daniel Eberhard, who's your race winner tonight from Talladega Superspeedway. As tonight's coverage of the 2020 RealSimRacing Full Throttle Cup Series is powered by Boosted, the place where gamers and creators go to monetize digitally. Their team will build you a totally free e-commerce store and help get sponsorships for those looking to build their brand online. Boosted is the #1 sponsorship platform for esports influencers. Join their team and visit boosted.club for more information. Well, you saw the product, and this is the result. A celebration on the front straightaway for Daniel Eberhard, who's the first driver to lock into the round of 8 as we welcome you back into the RaceSpot TV booth. Evan Pasoko, Justin Prince, along with our producer, Hugo Luis, with you. And let's go trackside and talk now with the 5-time race winner on 2020, but most importantly, the first member of the round of 8. Daniel Eberhard, your race winner tonight from Talladega Superspeedway. Daniel, congratulations.
Heck yeah, man. That was man, that'll make you old quick. Whew. But I love plate racing. Anybody that knows me knows I love plate racing. I'm always at the front of these things. And you got to be aggressive. You got to make moves. And you got to be selfish the whole time. I know that, they cleared me. But, and the 95, coming back behind me and pushing me, he could have went out and, that's where the luck gets involved, but the skill of it is where you have to be at the front of these things all the time, and you have to want to be in the lead with the last couple of laps to go. And I stay true to that, and I work to that, and it survived tonight.
And it's funny you mentioned that because I think we said with about 15 laps to go that you were only out here to win the race. It didn't look like you were trying to make friends, and it works. Of course, though, it wasn't the 90 car up front all night. Didn't even qualify. 2/3 of the field didn't qualify for that matter. And everybody always tries to time it right, to stay back, to stay out of incidents, and then to get up into the mix early. What about that strategy went right for you tonight, timing-wise?
Dave Washington and Dylan Jones parking it in turn 1 and 2 and watching the whole field destroy each other was probably the turning point of the night. But no, like you said, you're not out there in plate racing to make friends. You got to be willing to be selfish. You got to leave teammates hanging. You've got to work the runs and make the runs work with you. It was crazy all night. But this is one thing I've never understood is in real racing you don't see a lot of that. Like Talladega yesterday, you don't see a lot of the guys trying to fight with the chasers as much, or the playoff drivers as much, but they always give way to them a lot. But like in this, if I wasn't a playoff driver, I would be aggressive like everybody was tonight up front. That was their time to shine because they know people like us don't want to wreck.
There were many points in this race where the playoff guys were only, 2 or 3 of them inside of the top 10 or top 15. This race ends with half of the top 10 being playoff drivers. So that strategy seemingly having worked out for you, and obviously coming from the disappointment of how Las Vegas ended, transitioning into this race where you get the win, and now you don't have to worry about the Roval, which is the big thing. Tell me kind of about the up and down that the last week has been from Vegas now to here.
It's like Justin Prince said last week on the broadcast. He said, "What was he thinking?" I have no clue what I was thinking. I was trying to get past the 30, and then Tom was up there in front of me, and then I just kind of like got loose or something. I don't know. It's like I moved the wheel. I kind of got nervous because I come up on him so quick, and I didn't really think about it. I was trying to get away. I was the first one who pitted, and I was trying to get away from Benefield coming on strong. I was trying to get up and clear myself from Andrew and get going from him, get my lap back. When Las Vegas happened, I was put down. I was like, oh no, I got to come in here because the Roval is not going to suit me very well. It's not like a winding corner like Daytona is. I did good there, but the Roval's got some tight corners, and that takes a lot more skill on the roadside, and I don't have that just yet. But just to knock this out, get this out of the way, and to be the only one who's locked in to go into the next round so far, that's a good thing to go with right there.
This is normally the point where I'd ask you how you feel about then the tracks in the round of 8, since you're not worried about the Roval next week. But instead, I'll give you this: 5th race win of 2020, tying you with Andrew Ferdinand for the most in this series this year. Granted, how incredibly impressive his run has been for these last 2 years plus, a back-to-back Full Throttle Cup champion, Icebreaker champions mixed in there as well. To be right there with him, and in fact now even on wins and ahead of him in the points, what does that aspect mean? Because I know that you've had a target on him for quite some time.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the guy I've gone to 2 races with. He's been in the back seat of my car going to races with me. He's a great friend, and I mean a very good competitor on and off the racetrack, and he's always quick. I mean, no, but he worked so hard for it, and he deserves it each and every weekend. And, I can't take that away from him, and I don't get upset with him how fast he is all the time. There's sometimes I'll be like, man, I feel like I'm saving tires just like you, but you're still killing me. But he works hard for it, and he deserves every inch of it. And to be tied with him means a lot. I should be probably one ahead due to Daytona, but Grant had to make that move. But I just wanted to knock one of these plate races off. I've won in the Winter Series, and I wanted to win tonight so bad because I love plate racing, and I finally did it.
Plate winner in the Full Throttle Cup Series, and a lot of pressure taken off the chest as we head to Charlotte next week. Daniel, you put on a show. I can never say that you don't, and tonight it ends with the 90 machine in victory lane. We appreciate your racing with us. Congrats on the win.
Thank you, Evan.
The race winner tonight in the Boosted Club 200, Daniel Eberhardt goes to victory lane. He's off to the next round. And Justin, one point that he mentioned was those guys trying to play spoiler, how in real life the non-playoff drivers might give a little bit more. Bradley Burke wanted the win tonight just as much as anybody else. It ends in a P2 tonight, and you're standing by with him.
Yes, indeed. He came so close this evening to come away with the checkered flag, but in the end, just about a few 100 short. Bradley, how do you feel about how tonight's race went for you? You were up in the front just about the entire night.
Well, the way my luck usually goes in the restrictor plate races, I actually feel pretty good. Not a bad way to come back from being suspended and having some wheel issues, so pretty proud of that. I felt like I kind of was stuck there. I felt like I only had a chance at it if I did push the 90 car up to the front, and I just didn't think that the other two up ahead of us were going to wreck that early.
Yeah, that was a crazy run towards the start and finish line for the final lap of this one, but it seemed like you had a game plan this evening where you were hooked up with Davis just about the entire evening. It was difficult for some cars to even get by you at some points. What was that essential game plan in reality, and how do you feel that went through in terms of execution tonight?
Well, for me, being knocked, or not making the playoffs actually, and basically just racing for fun at this point, I made it a point to, if any of my teammates got up into the front with me, since I was up there for most of the race, that I would make it a point to, if I didn't feel like I had a chance at it, I would try to at least help one of them. And Grant ended up being the only one who didn't have damage at the time, and me and him have always, since I got on here on iRacing, have always been able to tandem and do the restrictor plate race, get through the pack pretty well together. So we have experience with it, and that was basically my plan. I wasn't going to go for the win and risk wrecking him unless I knew I for sure had a chance at the win.
The next race, though, goes to the Charlotte Roval to turn attention towards that way. First, will we see you at the track there? If so, your thoughts on how that race may play out for you in the 95?
If I can get my pedal situation figured out, then yes, I definitely will race it. I love racing road courses, and I need to put a little bit more track time onto the Roval, but I do plan on racing it and helping out my teammates any way that I can, and hopefully it's a good, fun, clean race. Like I said, road courses are one of my favorites, so hopefully it goes well.
What is that pedal situation before we let you go in clarification?
Well, I'm on a G27. I've had it since about 2013, and before the race at Darlington, I actually had an issue where my brake pedal, it won't register anymore. So I'm actually using my clutch pedal as my brake pedal, and I was racing that way at Darlington before that whole issue came about. So if I can get that figured out for the road course, then that'll be great.
Thank you very much for the time. Congratulations on the P2 finish.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate the broadcast and everything you guys do for the league.
Absolutely. That's Bradley Burke coming home in second tonight for Flat Out Motorsports. It was a stellar run for the 95 machine, but one air driver was able to navigate through a lot of the traffic by the ending stages of this race and was one of the drivers who was trying to tandem draft up towards the front. Kyle Trudell now joins me in the broadcast booth. Kyle, how would you describe this race tonight in that blue Ford Mustang?
Whew, it was crazy, man. Just wanted to kind of ride there and go with that strategy of just hanging out and watching things unfold at first, and kind of just wait until the end, really. But yeah, it was pretty wild there, similar to yesterday.
What do you mean by the similar to yesterday, if you don't want me asking?
With the Cup race.
Oh, yes. So, for you personally then tonight, how difficult was it to avoid some of the trouble? Because, well, one of the theories for drivers to go and drop to the back is, well, the mid-pack has more time to react if there's trouble than the leaders. I believe they crashed in the mid-pack twice trying to avoid said leaders tonight. How difficult was it in that grouping of cars, as your car is a bit beat up?
Yeah, I was saying too earlier that this is probably the first time at one of the big super speedway tracks to miss, for the most part, every wreck of the night. So that's a first for me. Usually, eventually you get caught up. But with that first wreck as well on the backstretch, I was luckily just low enough and on the inside to be able to get to the apron on the backstretch. Of course, there's tons of room down there, so it buys you time. Kind of got by one car that was sideways, and the second one kind of surprised me, so I kind of had to hang it out there and almost caught the inside wall. So definitely a lot of close calls, but you got to be lucky too.
Now, the point situation is going to be fairly tight now at this situation now for you, because we go road course racing next, and your thoughts on the next race on the calendar for the Charlotte Roval as you try and be one of those drivers who fight to make sure they're locked in. You're in a safe spot, should note. Tentatively, you're in second in the points now behind David Washington, 7 points back.
All right, yeah, right on. That's, that's definitely this is kind of like a win with that kind of buffer with the points. Going in next week, anything can happen. Same kind of wild card situation as tonight was. But I'm pretty confident on the road courses, especially the Roval. I feel like if you're going to compare, any of the road courses that we go to, the Roval is maybe a little bit more like Sonoma, where you got some low speed corners and you got to work that throttle and be careful with it. So I'm looking forward to it. I think I can be pretty strong there.
Thank you very much for the time. Congratulations on a strong run for your number 7.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you. I want to mention Michael Kaczynski and Extreme Motorsports for helping me out there and helping me drive up to the front there once we said go. Joined up with that team, and I'm looking forward to the future with these guys.
Good to hear that you now have some teammates for the rest of the campaign. Congratulations on the run.
Yeah, how about it? Thank you.
How about it indeed? That's Kyle Trudell coming home in third tonight. A heck of a run tonight for some of these competitors, Evan.
Yeah, a lot of drivers, we talk about the chaos. If there's chaos, there's drivers that are hurt by it. There's drivers that are benefit. And certainly, a lot of those drivers, just looking at the plus minus, guys in the top 10, plus 20, plus 26, plus 19, That's your top 3 drivers, where they gained from the start of this race. Hanging back, staying out of trouble certainly proved to be a beneficial strategy. And you talked about the points. Unofficial at this moment. Penalties and whatnot still need to be reviewed. But thankfully, unlike Vegas, I'm not expecting anything major. David Washington goes to the championship lead. You mentioned Kyle Trudell right there, 7 points off. But the concern is those drivers right-hand side. And they all lost positions tonight. Brian Chambliss dropped 5 spots. He's now the bubble guy, 3 points behind Dylan Jones. Eric Stanford dropped 3 positions. Adam Benefiel drops 10 positions, Justin, after he finished this race in 34th position. That is, I think, the biggest surprise and the biggest hit. Joseph Tice remains where he entered the night. That was 12th. He is 29 back to the point where he's basically fighting for a win.
Yeah, Benefiel is, I think, also a maybe must-win as well, because that is a lot of spots to try and make up, and now it's going to be very difficult, even for Stanford and Chambliss. The drivers who all survived towards the checker flag for the most part, or at least had a decent buffer like Orion, but still kept chugging along, they're going to be able, I think, to potentially be somewhat safe. It's just a matter of how good are they going to be at the Roval, because as mentioned, it's not an easy road course. It's one where many mistakes can happen. It's one where many strategies can happen. Honestly, outside of drivers like Andrew Freenosh, who've been known to be strong on the road courses, we could see anybody finish inside the top 5 and lock themselves into the round of 8.
Yeah, it should bode well for Dylan Jones as well. He was a top 5 car at the Roval last year. Freitas was a runner-up to Connor Horn, so those drivers should be good. So Chambliss, Stanford, Benefiel, Tice, I'm worried if I'm a bubble driver anyways. But the fact that the guy we're chasing is really good concerns me. Thomas J. George squeaked out a top 10 last year at the Roval. He just needs to focus on being clean. If those cars who performed well at the Roval last year perform well this year, it's going to be tough, because it's not like, the road course ringers are down in that bubble and they have a real good shot to come ahead. They're going to be playing from behind going in, and likely throughout that race, maybe hoping that some of those drivers up the road have some issues and get into calamity. But let's talk about this Roval, because it was the new thing to the iRacing service, of course, and it had been touched up. We raced at the Roval, though, even on an old configuration. So now that the Roval's back in its true form, it's such a great race. Not only the concept in real life of being able to take the oval, reconfigure it, great from a spectator standpoint as well, that you can be at a road race and not only have to deal with only looking at 1 or 2 corners, but it is such a fun track. The elevation changes on the infield, the different gearing through the corners. You got that bus stop on the back straightaway, plus the chicane at a turn number 4 now. It's one of my favorite tracks. And the way that it works in the sim, Justin, is we don't have yellows. So it is going to be a race where there may be chaos that takes some drivers out. That could be a factor. But for the most part, you're going to have about an hour to an hour and a half of racing to control your own destiny.
Yeah, it's going to be important to be able to hit your marks. And the main thing's going to be the backstretch chicane, because that came into play for the Coke race last year specifically. Remember that coming into play with that adjustment after, the bus stop shenanigans for the first year of the Roval. As well, though, it's going to be a tricky track to try and pass at, because it's one where you need to be willing to be aggressive, but also one where you need to hit your marks right. You hit one of these blue turtles, you end up getting snapped loose off one of the corners, you're likely getting freight train and losing a spot or 2 in the process, and/or spinning around and causing some calamity. This is not going to be the easiest road course race of the season by far. It's not going to be the easiest race to even take part in. In fact, it may be one of the most difficult races in the entire playoffs this season.
And if you're not a fan of it, if you can get through it, I've got good news, because it's the last road course race of the season. The round of 8, probably one of the easiest track-wise, but we tighten things up where at that point you're going to be at the top 4. That's a razor thin margin. The round of 8 will go racing at Kansas, Texas. and then a wild one in Martinsville, where earlier this year we saw an RSR record 20-plus cautions in that one. But all of that still to come. That's it for us here tonight from the virtual Talladega Superspeedway. So on behalf of our entire team at RaceSpot TV, RealSimRacing, and your broadcast crew tonight, for Hugo Luis downstairs, for Justin Prince and myself, Evan Pasoko, thanks for hanging out with us at a Monday night, and congratulations to Daniel Epperhart, who is now a 5-time race winner in 2020. We are back in 1 week's time for the Round of 12 finale from the virtual Charlotte Motor Speedway Roval. That's Monday, October the 12th. It's a 9:30 p.m. start. That race and every race of the 2020 RealSimRacing Full Throttle Cup Series, powered by Boosted, can be found right here exclusively on RaceSpot TV and the iRacing Esports Network. Until next time, good night from Talladega Superspeedway, where Daniel Epperhart is your race winner.